Hi, my name is Slade Meadows, and I'm a student at the University of North Texas. And here is my Info 5810 midterm project, which I named The Realities of COVID-19, a Broad Analysis. And so here's the outline. We'll be going over the project summary, the data, the research questions, a little bit about the pre-processing, the tools and function used for the data analysis and visualization, results and visualization, interpretation, and conclusion. So in summary of the project, you're going to see that I use pivot tables, pivot charts, and various other Excel functions such as auto sum with averages and discrete statistics, as well as a few others to try to give everyone a broad overview of how COVID-19 has affected all the countries within this data set. There's a lot of data, so I don't hammer in too like on a micro level on anything, but try to simply, at least for the first analysis, explain the broad points. And so I'll cover a lot of the hot topics being discussed in the media today, such as the validity of data from places like China, Russia, and how testing, especially early testing, impacts the other values within the data set, such as overall cases, overall deaths, etc. I'm going to cover which countries have really been hit the hardest by COVID-19. At first, you may just think it's the people with the countries with the highest overall cases, but once you get down into the population by millions, it really shows how the virus has really affected their society as a whole. And then I attempt to explain why some countries that are similar to each other have had very different reactions to COVID within the data. So the data is dataset 2 within the assignment, or covidcountry.csv. It's from kaggle.com, and it's from a guy named Tavish Agarwal. Excuse me. It was last dated on October 1st, 2020. It spans 164 days between April 11th and September 30th, and it contains 34,933 rows of data about COVID-19 on the country level. I believe every country is included in the data set, although some have missing data, which we will explain in the pre-processing. It contains 14 columns: country, total cases, new cases, total deaths, new deaths, total recovered, active cases, serious/critical, total cases by 1 million pop, deaths by 1 million pop, total tests by 1 million pop, continent, and date. Originally, it's organized by date in ascending order, and then country in alphabetical order or ascending order. So the research questions I wanted, like I said earlier, provide a broad overview of COVID-19 and how it's affected the world. I want to compare how first world and third world countries have struggled from it differently. I want to speak about, to kind of dive into, does increased testing reduce the amount of deaths? Does it change anything? Is it something just being portrayed as being effective, or is it actually effective in stopping COVID? And then finally, can we trust data from China, Russia, North Korea, pretty much any authoritarian regime that you wouldn't really trust them for other things? So we'll look into that. So the pre-processing, like I mentioned, there's a lot of countries within the data set that are missing some values or entries. While we could go through in another data set and replace them with average values like we did for like our rapid minor assignments, etc., I don't believe that's ethical or a good idea for this data, simply because we're using this data theoretically to make decisions, to look at possible policy changes, stuff like that, and simply going in and putting averages for data we don't understand, I don't think it's a good idea. I mentioned in my paper that, for instance, I think it was Afghanistan or another country, started with an A, that is missing a lot of testing data. And we don't know whether that's an issue within downloading the data set. Maybe it was missed or excluded for some reason, or maybe where they just never provided data from that country. Maybe they don't have tests from that country, like we don't really know. And while you could investigate each country more fully in another analysis, we didn't have time for that in this analysis. So I did not believe it was ethical to replace the data with averages or anything similar. So moving on, we used Excel was the only tool we used for this assignment. I made heavy use of pivot tables and pivot charts like I've done for my previous assignments. I just really like them. I feel like they're really functional and they're easy for me to use and really dive into the analysis part of the data without working through different functions. I also use descriptive statistics and auto-sum averages for some of the summary tables, among some other things I'm probably missing, but continuing. So my results and visualizations, I felt like the actual visualization summed it up pretty well. For total cases, as you can see, the USA, India, Brazil, Russia are at the top of the list, followed by Colombia, Peru, Spain, etc. Pretty much the big, heavily populated countries. But surprisingly, once you go to cases by 1 million pop, it's a lot more of the condensed, smaller countries that were, I guess, their society was most affected. For every 1 million people in Qatar, there was 44,000 people that had COVID-19. So that's a big population, part of their population. So places like that, society may have like fully shut down for a few months, while in the USA, while we have the most cases in the world, people are continuing to their day-to-day lives like nothing's going on. When you go by total deaths, USA, number one, up there. Brazil, India, close by. You may notice that Russia is nowhere to be seen on this list, which I talk about is a little suspicious. Makes you wonder if they're reporting their deaths correctly. But we don't really have any proof that they're not, other than they're not where they should be on this list, in my opinion. Total cases by million pop, total deaths by million pop. Again, a lot of smaller countries are hit, but look, USA down here doing pretty terribly with 639 deaths per million people. And so we're right in here with third world countries like Ecuador and when Brazil's developing. But as you can see, you wouldn't think the UK and USA would be in this list right here if you'd asked us a year ago. Total tests, China, way far up there, but their total testing per million doesn't align very well with this. I don't know if this is a real number or not, honestly. USA, we've done a lot of testing, but it's not been enough. And I believe it's been recently in the last few months, so it was a little late. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Total tests by million pop, all the small countries, they did really well because, well, obviously they're small. So it was pretty easy for them to test everyone multiple times sometimes. So what we did find is that as tests increased, deaths decreased. As you can see from the list right here, I broke them down into groups of 10 and averaged them on this list right here. So aside from Andorra, which tested a ton, if you took that out of the list, these trends would line up. As you can see, as the deaths drop on this side, the tests increase on this side. So there is a definite trend that as testing increases, deaths decrease by population. So that begs the question of where would the US be if we continue testing? First world countries are more interconnected, both externally and internally, making them like really hot zones. They spread the virus at a faster pace, and so with hospitals filling up, infrastructure shutting down, it causes the death rate to climb in some countries that you wouldn't expect, like USA, UK, etc., to where it's a much slower pace in some third world countries. It's very likely that China manipulated the data as a total deaths million pop. China ranks 183 out of 219 countries. And sorry, I ran out of time. I did not pace myself very well. But if you read my paper, I think you will find everything that I missed in this PowerPoint. Thank you.